Hi everybody, this is the first of three tutorials I'm going to put together about using 3D modeling software for schematic level master plan design. This one's about SketchUp. As you can see, we're going to go through the process of how do you take an image, sketch plan, scheme for a master plan on this site and map it onto a 2D surface like this one, create a projected texture, bring it down here. I've got a couple kind of generic building forms then we're going to be able to place on the site. Also talk about using Artisan as a way to modify the terrain to accommodate the buildings, and then also use Scatter in order to place plants really quickly. Again, at this level of design, we're not going to worry about creating geometry on the site for roads and sidewalks and parking lots. That's all just going to be visualized by the image that we bring in. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do, we always set up this model with a 2D version and a 3D version. And so the first thing I want to do is bring an image in. I have a sketch plan for a partial idea for this design. So I'm going to go to File, Import, and here's my PNG file. Now, one of the things you'll notice when after I bring this in is you'll notice that I crop this in Photoshop. And essentially, if you're creating an image to fit into using SketchUp, it's not critical that you do this if you're going to use Rhino. However, this is really important because the way it uses UV mapping to locate this image on the site. So it's kind of good practice either way. Essentially, I've used Photoshop to crop this to the outermost corner. So you see it just touches this corner here at the bottom, this one at the left. It looks like it's off here, but they're actually, the property line is in and the road is edge is what I want to snap to. So it's cropped out there, and then this is the right. So even if you have an irregular shaped site, you just want to locate the outermost corners on each of the four main axes and crop it down so it fits there. And you'll see how we use those to place this. Also, make sure you have texture checked in your dialog box down here, not image. Otherwise, we won't be able to map it onto the surface. Okay, once I've got that, you don't have to try and snap this to a corner. It's actually easier if you just place it in here. So it's in on the surface, because we're going to use the floating pin method in order to lock this down at the right corners. So I'm going to right click on this, choose texture. Again, when you select this, make sure you just have the surface selected. If you double click on this and then right click, you won't get the same context menu. So make sure you just click, select the surface only, right click, texture, position. Now I've got this already set, but normally what you'll see is the fixed pins. So this is skew and distort and scale and rotate. But what I want to use, I could just scale this and keep scaling it up and then moving it and scaling it and moving it to try and get it to fit. Eventually it will, but it's a lot quicker to right click on this and go to uncheck fixed pins. So now I have floating pins. So I want to put each of these four, that's all I have to work with, at those four outermost points. So this top one, click on it. I want to put this right on that corner of the roadway, as I mentioned, not that particular corner. The left one, I'm going to place right here. And since this line weight is a little thick, I actually cropped it in the center, because that's really where the geometry is. That one's located at that corner, and the right one, this outermost right corner. Okay, right off the vertice there, right in the center of that line. So once I have those located, click and drag, hold the button down and drag those right to the corners. And this will stretch the image proportionately to those points. And once I snap that last one in place, you'll see that fits in there perfectly. Okay, so super quick way to get a site plan image mapped on there. So that's our first step. Now I can right click and choose done. But before we can apply this to the landform, I need to right click, choose texture, and convert this to a projected texture. That means that when I place this on the landform, despite the fact that it's made up of lots of small triangulated faces, it will treat it as one projected image straight down the surface. So now I'm going to choose my paint bucket, Alt, hold the Alt key down, left click, close this group, edit the group, and then click, and you'll see that will map that on there exactly as it was above. If you see a bunch of, if it's broken up into a bunch of little pieces, it's because you didn't turn it into a projected texture first. Okay, so this is the first step. Now I've got my image, and you can see we've got the slope on there, and we can see where the buildings are. And eventually I'm going to take those couple townhouses and apartments and drop those in here. But because this is just the existing landform, if I really want to make those buildings fit, I need to do a little grading first. And this is where the Artisan plugin comes in. So the first thing I want to do is go to View and choose Hidden Geometry. And you can see now the triangulated mesh here. And this isn't too bad. I tried to keep it, not too detailed when I initially created the landform, so it wasn't too complex. And this is okay. If I really want to be able to fine tune this, I might want to subdivide some of this. So I'll just show you how to do that. Maybe I'll do that in these two down here, and we'll leave the rest the way they are. In order to do that, the Artisan tools are right here in my toolbar locations. I'm going to choose the Select tool, and I'm going to come in here, and the right and left arrow keys make this bigger or smaller. And all I'm doing is selecting all the areas that, and maybe I'll go a little outside there. And since this is, I'm not creating the leveling platform right now, maybe I'll just do this whole side. I'm just going to subdivide this so it has a little finer texture. So just make sure you get everything selected that's underneath the building footprints. Okay, these are townhouses. And okay, across the front here. Doesn't, there's no absolute perfect dimension to do this. Okay, so I've got that whole basic area. Now in the Artisan tools over on the side, I've got a subdivide selection. So I'm going to click on that, and now you can see it just broke that into a lot finer mesh. It also lost the texture, right? So all I need to do is turn Hidden Geometry off, get my paint bucket, hold the Alt key down, pick up this texture, and then click on that. It will reapply it. And now I do want to actually have the Hidden Geometry back on so I can see what I'm working with. So again, now I'm going to go back to my selection tool, and since I don't want to do all of this at one level, I'm going to hit the Escape key just to deselect it. And I'm going to come in here. Now I can get a little more closely around that particular building footprint, right? Without selecting everything else. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now, if I want these townhouses to sit level on this, you can see there's a little slope across there already. What I want to do is to use the Make Planar tool. And in this case, instead of choosing Best, I'm going to choose X and Y. And you can see that it just created a perfectly level building platform. Now, it picks probably an average height there. And in this case, it's below the road area, road surface, which probably is not very good, right? I don't want my water draining into my building. In order to fix that, I'm just going to select the regular SketchUp Move tool. We grab this corner back here and then move that up so it's sitting a little bit above the road. Maybe back down slightly. That's pretty good. So just make that adjustment now. If you're not getting the blue axis, you can tap on the up arrow on your keyboard and that will lock it in. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now I'm not too worried about how it looks back here. I can go back. It's a little extreme slope change there, but I can go back and smooth that out later on. That's easy to adjust, and I'll show you how we can do that. All right, so I'm going to go back to my Select tool, tap the Escape key to deselect that, and I'm going to come down to the next building platform. Maybe I'll make that a little smaller. If you select more than you really need, you can hold the Control key down, or the Shift key, sorry, and deselect it. Make that a little smaller, come back in. Just keep that right about there. Okay, so I'm going to do the same process. Choose Make Planar, XY. Again, I'm going to zoom in here and check on this. Again, it's a little bit low, so I'm going to use the Move tool. It's a little higher than the previous platform, and still a little higher than the road. So that's exactly what I'm trying to accomplish there. All right, let's do it one more time. So I'm going to take the Select brush from Artisan, hit Escape, come back in here, try and get this building footprint. Okay. And you know, it's overlapping some of that previous one. Doesn't look perfectly smooth, but that's okay because I'm going to adjust that right now. Again, make planar, X, Y. Same issue. Go to the move tool. And tap the up arrow. It's about the same as the other one. Maybe I'll pull that up a little bit more. Okay, so let's just leave those the way they are. And now I'm going to go back to my sculpt brush. This is where, and again, I tap the escape key to get rid of that selection. So I've got kind of a rough transition back here, and maybe this last platform I'm going to adjust a little bit more too. So the sculpt brush actually allows us to, you know, move some of this up and down. One of the things I like to also do is go to the settings and make sure auto smooth sculpt is on. And again, the higher the up arrow, the more adjustment it makes. So I'm going to come back in here and kind of adjust this up to make that transition. And you can see it's kind of smooths it off. Now, if you get to the point where, okay, I've kind of got this transition adjusted a little bit. I don't want that to get too high. I'm going to switch to the smooth option. Now I can come in here and it just kind of blends that surface. I start at the high point, blends it down. You see it pulled that low point up right there. So I'm not really trying to manipulate the landform up and down. I'm just making a transition. So this gives you a really fluid, interactive way of doing some grading. And I'm just blending from one slope to another. So I want to be careful I don't get too far up in the platform because it will change it from being level. But I can come in here. If you start in the low areas, it kind of tends to pull them up a little bit. See how it brings those low areas up there a little. Not trying to get too close to the foundation. It's just kind of blending them off and smoothing them together. Okay, so that's the process that you use Artisan. I use the make planar and then manually go in and kind of use the sculpt brush to smooth it out, and then where you've got it basically the right height and you just need to blend it back in. And of course, keep in mind as you're doing this, you're essentially determining how many trees you're destroying on the site as you grade this out. The longer it takes you to get back to undisturbed grade, the more plants you're going to displace as part of the grading process. So it's very quick and easy to do, but just keep in mind that that's the end result. You're trying to keep the grading. If you wanted to make it really tight to save trees, you could add a wall, you could pull these down. I'm just showing you how to use the tools to get it to kind of blend out the way you want. Okay, so now that I've got that basically done, I'm going to get rid of my hidden geometry. And now I can start placing some buildings. And again, I could start placing those directly on the 3D model, but I find it easier to kind of work with the 2D version. So I will start, let's grab this townhouse. I'm going to use the move tool, grab a corner, tap the control key, and that will give me a copy. So once I get one copy, it's actually pretty close there, then I'm going to click, tap the control key, drop it in there, move around, rotate it. Okay, and I'm not, it should be tap the control key, make a copy. Just trying to get them basically positioned. If you want to move another one, just hit the escape key. That'll release that selection. Tap the control key, pull off a copy. Okay, now I didn't adjust these. If you get something you don't want, just tap the control key. Tap control. Okay, and then I've got some of these apartment buildings. I'll just grab that one. Tap Control. These don't really match the footprints completely, but that's okay. Since I have a fairly uniform arrangement here, maybe I'll place those, and then if I want, I can select both of those. Choose the Move tool, tap Control. Yeah, I'm just going to roughly get them into place. Hit the Escape key, move that one over, rotate that around a little bit. Okay, so I've got those basically placed in there pretty quickly now. And since they're on the 2D version and I need them down on the terrain model, I can use a plugin for SketchUp called Drop GC. So I'm going to select those, then just right click, Drop GC, and it's going to drop them right down onto the landform. So the ones that I had already graded, you can see they're sitting on there very nicely. Everything fits really well. Some of these are going to be floating like that. You can see up off the ground because it picked one corner and locked that into the terrain. But you can see, however, with the use of the Artisan plugin, you can really smooth out your terrain and have that grading fit very nicely in there. Okay, so that's how you can place the buildings. Again, we're not going to bother creating this geometry for the roads. That's what you can have on your sketch plan, and that way, you know, if you want to take a view from down inside, I can just say I want to stand here and look up there, and we can look at those views. Now, the other elements you need to have as part of your schematic master plan studies is the vegetation. And using Scatter, that makes the job really easy. And Scatter, we can use the log work trees for right now. Let's just use the Scatter built-in library because they're simpler and quicker. And in order to do that, we want these two buttons over here. We want to open Scatter by using the library. And if we scroll down and choose trees, I'm going to select proxies and load. Now I've got my dialog box here, and I've already got the trees placed in here, but I haven't picked a host. And in this case, because I'm actually going to leave this set on uniform, leave the spacing the way it is, I can adjust that later. I am going to adjust this pointing to like the middle so that it will respond to the terrain. So instead of just being vertical, it'll actually orient the tree based on the normal of the surface, a perpendicular line from whatever. So if it's on a slope, it will be at a slight angle. So anyway, I'll adjust that. Now what I want to do is add a paint area that's an include area. So now if I come in here, and I'm going to make my brush a little bigger so I can see it, something like 30 feet. Okay. Oops, sorry, I kind of selected that house. I don't want that. I'm going to delete that, create a new one. Okay, now I can come in here and just start painting. Create an enclosure there. So it knows where the surface of the terrain is, and this just gives me a quick, easy way to paint that on there. Now, you're not seeing anything, and I can't regenerate this because right now I still have used surface boundaries as include area. So when I uncheck this, it should allow me to, oh, sorry. Yeah, I do need to select this as the host surface, so it knows what surface it's connecting to, and then I need to uncheck the use object boundary. So if I regenerate this now you can see every place where I painted that, I've got these trees. Now, if you don't want to place a big group of trees, I can come back in here and add a series of pick individual points. So now I could come in and just say, okay, I want one here, here, if you want street trees. You can also draw a line. You'll notice down there if you want to make a line and then select that line or curve, but it's probably just as quick. And the scatter allows you to maintain. Now in this case, the street trees, they're set up, if I scroll down here, to have some randomness to them. Now in case of a woodland or a group of trees, you might want that. In this case, maybe I want to turn that off, although it probably should do this as a separate scatter group, but I'm going to turn that off to demonstrate it and then hit regenerate. Now these trees will all still stay the same size. I still have some rotating and mirroring so that they don't look the same, but it's keeping the size fairly consistent. And again, once that's done, if I actually render this with V-Ray, you can see that adds a lot more detail in there. So again, this is a quick sketch plan, doesn't have all the curves details. We'll get to that in the next step of design. But as a quick way to kind of evaluate your design ideas and to visualize them without having to build a lot of geometry, this gives you a way to explore your alternatives and start looking at what the spaces look like, how the grading is going to work. You can see whether these buildings fit on the landscape or not very well, and how much grading you have to do to make them fit. So that's the process we want you to go through as part of this. This is for SketchUp. I'll be doing another tutorial for the same process in Rhino, and then a third one for Lumion. Now Lumion you will start either in SketchUp or Rhino, but you'll add the plants in Lumion. But you will have to do the grading and adjusting the landform either in Rhino or SketchUp.